Kids who got missing as a child. What happened when you were found? I was 5 years old when the world swallowed me whole. I don't remember everything, only fragments, like pieces of glass in a broken mirror, a crowded marketplace, my mother's hand slipping from mine, a voice calling my name, then a rush of bodies, the sharp smell of dust and darkness. When I woke, I wasn't in the arms of my mother or father. I was in the back of a rattling truck with strangers. My dress was torn, my face sticky with tears, and my throat raw from screaming. I cried until my body went limp, but no one came for me. Days blurred into weeks. I was passed around like something unwanted. The people who took me weren't kind, but they weren't cruel either. They just didn't care. I became another mouth to feed, another burden. They changed my name, clipped my hair short, and warned me never to ask questions. I learned silence young. Silence kept me alive. Years later, I would sometimes dream of a woman with soft hands and a laugh that sounded like bells. A man lifting me high into the sky, his cologne smelling faintly of pine. A house with warm light spilling from the windows. But whenever I woke, the dreams would slip away, leaving only the gnawing ache that I belonged somewhere else. Time is a thief. 20 years went by before fate decided to return me to where I started. I found them by accident. It was a name I overheard at work, a wealthy family in the city, well known for their successful businesses and their picture-perfect life. Something about it stirred a memory so deep I couldn't ignore it. I searched, pieced together fragments of old records, and when I saw their photograph online, my knees buckled. It was them, my parents. The faces were older, etched with time, but still familiar. My father's jawline, my mother's eyes. I carried them both in me. I imagined the reunion 1,000 times before I gathered the courage to knock on their door. I pictured my mother collapsing into tears, my father pulling me into his arms, their voices trembling as they whispered, "You're home. You're finally home." But life is never so kind. The house was a mansion now, larger than anything I remembered from my dreams. The door was opened not by them, but by her. She stood there in a silk dress, beautiful and perfect, with the same eyes as me, but brighter, more confident. My sister, the one they'd had after me. Her name, I would soon learn, was Sophia. When I said my name, her smile faltered, her brow creasing. She looked me up and down as if searching for the joke. Then she laughed, a short, disbelieving sound, and called for our parents. And when they came, when my mother and father stood in the doorway and looked at me, they didn't cry. They didn't run to embrace me. They stared, confusion, disbelief, and then something far worse, hesitation. I told them who I was, stumbling over the words, my heart clawing in my chest. I showed them the faded birthmark on my shoulder, the same one my mother once kissed goodnight. I reminded them of things no stranger could know. Slowly, recognition dawned in their eyes. My mother pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. My father's shoulders stiffened. Sophia's laughter died completely, but there were no tears of joy, no celebration, only silence, heavy enough to crush me. They had moved on. They had raised another daughter, built a new life, learned to live without me. My return was not a miracle. It was an inconvenience. That night, I lay awake in the guest room they offered me, staring at the ceiling, feeling smaller than I ever had in those years of absence. I was a ghost in my own home, an echo of a past they'd buried. I wanted to believe love could be rekindled, that blood was enough to stitch the torn fabric of our family. But as I listened to the muffled voices of my parents and Sophia arguing down the hall, I understood the truth. I was no longer their only daughter. I was the forgotten one, and deep down, I sensed that my return was not the end of my suffering. It was only the beginning. The house had been buzzing for weeks with preparations for Sophia's wedding. Every corner smelled of fresh flowers. Every hallway echoed with the rustle of silk dresses, and the staff scurried about as though the ceremony were the coronation of a queen. I kept to myself, invisible in the corners, watching a world that didn't belong to me. My parents spoke to me politely but distantly, as though I were a guest overstaying her welcome. Sophia, on the other hand, had made it clear I was an intruder. "Don't think you're part of this family now," she hissed one night as we passed in the hall. "You may share their blood, but I'm the daughter they chose." Her words burned, but I swallowed them in silence. I had learned long ago that answering only fed the fire. Her fiancé, Adrian Blake, came from money older than time itself. His family owned shipping lines, real estate, and political favours that could bend the city's laws. He was handsome, in that sharp, unyielding way that made people nervous. When I first met him, his handshake was cold, his eyes calculating. He barely looked at me as though my existence was irrelevant. The morning of the wedding was chaos disguised as celebration. The house filled with relatives, the garden overflowed with photographers, and my mother glided about in pearls, making sure every detail was perfect. I watched from a distance, my dress plain compared to Sophia's glittering gown. And then, just before the ceremony, everything unraveled. I was in the hallway when I heard the first scream. A bridesmaid stumbled from Sophia's room, pale as chalk. "She's gone!" she cried. "Sophia's gone!" The room erupted in panic. My father cursed under his breath. My mother clutched her pearls as though they might save her from scandal. Guests whispered, the media circled like vultures, and Adrian stood like a statue, fury tightening every line of his face. She wouldn't do this, my mother whispered, but her voice shook. But she had. Sophia had vanished, leaving behind her gown, her bouquet, and a note scrawled in lipstick across the mirror. I can't do this. Don't look for me. The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian turned on my parents, his voice low and dangerous. Do you have any idea what this humiliation will cost me? My family's reputation, my company's stock, everything is on the line. Fix this. I expected my parents to crumble, to beg for time. Instead, they looked at me. My stomach dropped. No, I whispered. You can't mean... You look enough alike, my father said, his voice clipped. Same build, same eyes. With the veil, no one will know. You can't be serious. I backed away, my heart hammering. My mother grabbed my hand, her grip iron. Do this for the family. Do this for us. Adrian's eyes fell on me then, truly on me for the first time. His gaze was cold, dissecting, and filled with loathing. You expect me to marry her? A stray you barely recognize as your daughter? She's blood, my mother said firmly, and blood is all that matters. The weight of their eyes crushed me. I wanted to scream, to run, to tell them I had no part in this. But where would I go? I had no one else, nowhere else. And in that moment, I understood. They didn't see me as a person. I was a solution, a stand-in. So I walked down the aisle in Sophia's place, the veil heavy over my face, the bouquet trembling in my hands. The guests rose, oblivious to the switch, their smiles bright and approving. Adrian stood at the altar, his jaw tight, his eyes burning holes through me. He didn't smile. He didn't move. When the vows came, his voice was clipped, forced, each word dripping with venom. And when he kissed me, it was not affection, but punishment. The applause thundered, the photographs flashed, and just like that, I was married, not because I was chosen, not because I was loved, but because I was convenient. That night, alone in the vast, cold bedroom of my new husband, I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my wedding dress. Adrian didn't touch me. He didn't even look at me. I will never forgive you for this, he said, before turning his back and extinguishing the light. The silence that followed was worse than any scream. I had dreamed of finding my family, of being loved again. Instead, I'd been traded like a pawn in a game I never agreed to play. And in the darkness, I understood. My suffering had only just begun. Marriage is supposed to be the start of a new life. For me, it was the burial of one. The morning after our wedding, the papers hailed the union as a flawless success. The photographs showed a glowing bride, a proud groom, and two families united. No one knew the truth. No one saw the way Adrian avoided my gaze, the way his hand recoiled from mine as soon as the cameras turned away. Inside his mansion, a house of glass and marble that echoed with emptiness, I became little more than a shadow. Adrian didn't speak to me unless necessary. At dinners, he scrolled through his phone, answering curtly if I asked a question. In public, he played the role of the dutiful husband, his hand resting lightly on my back, his smile sharp and convincing. But behind closed doors, he withdrew into his study, locking the door as if to bar me from his world. Sometimes I would pass him in the hall and catch a flicker of something in his eyes. Anger, contempt, maybe even regret. But it would vanish as quickly as it appeared. The staff noticed. They treated me politely, but without warmth, their loyalty bound to him. I often ate alone. I often slept alone too, my side of the bed untouched, the silence so heavy it pressed against my lungs. At first I tried. I cooked his favourite meals, arranged the study with fresh flowers, even dressed in ways I thought might please him. Each attempt was met with indifference, sometimes mockery. One evening, I placed a hand on his arm during dinner, desperate for even a shred of acknowledgement. He glanced at me, then slowly set down his glass. Don't mistake this arrangement for anything more than what it is, he said coolly. You were a replacement, nothing more. The words sliced me open, but I forced myself not to cry. I had cried too much in my life already. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. The world saw us as the perfect couple, he the successful heir, I the elegant wife. Inside, the walls closed in tighter each day. But loneliness does strange things. It sharpens you. It forces you to see yourself clearly. I began filling my days with small acts of rebellion. I wandered the city alone, explored bookstores, learned to drive when Adrian refused to send the driver. I signed up for classes, languages, painting, even business. I started investing the allowance Adrian tossed at me, like pocket change, learning to stretch and grow it quietly. If Adrian wouldn't see me as his equal, then I would build myself into someone who no longer needed his acknowledgement. Yet, no matter how strong I tried to become, the ache of rejection never left me. At night, I still lay awake wondering why fate had dragged me back to a family only to use me as their pawn. Then, on a stormy evening a year after the wedding, I heard my name whispered through the halls. Clara. I turned, and there she was. Sophia. Her hair was longer, her beauty untouched by hardship. She looked at me with the same smirk she had the day I first knocked on our parents' door, only sharper now, more dangerous. "I see you've been keeping my husband warm," she said sweetly, though her eyes gleamed with malice. My blood ran cold. Sophia was back. And though I didn't know it then, her return would unravel everything I had fought to build in that cold house. Because she hadn't come back for reconciliation. She had come back to destroy me. Sophia returned as if nothing had happened. No apologies, no shame, no explanation. She waltzed into my home, our home, though Adrian had never allowed me to feel it was mine, and smiled as though the past year had been an extended vacation. My parents welcomed her with open arms. My mother wept, clutching her as though she were the prodigal child, while my father murmured about forgiveness and second chances. They didn't mention me at all. To them, I was invisible again. Adrian's reaction was worse. When he first saw her, his eyes lingered in a way they had never lingered on me. His jaw tightened, his fists curled, and for the first time in months, his voice trembled, not with rage, but with something dangerously close to longing. That night at dinner, Sophia sat across from me in the very seat I had claimed through silent endurance. She laughed at Adrian's remarks, touched his arm when she leaned in, whispered jokes that left him smirking. I watched the man who had never once smiled at me. Not once in a year. I wanted to scream. Instead, I set down my fork and excused myself, my chest tight and my throat raw. But Sophia didn't stop there. She began lingering after dinners, finding excuses to be in the mansion. Sometimes I woke in the middle of the night to hear her laughing in the hall with Adrian, their voices hushed but intimate. Other times, she would brush past me in the corridor, her perfume clinging to the air, her smirk cutting deeper than any blade. And then came the first video. It arrived in my inbox late one night. I nearly deleted it, thinking it spam, until I opened it. Sophia, in the bed that had been mine for a year, her body entwined with Adrian's, his face buried in her neck, his hands gripping her with a hunger he had never shown me. Her eyes met the camera, daring, triumphant. At the end, she leaned close, her lips forming words I couldn't hear, but understood perfectly. This should have been mine all along. My hands shook as I dropped the phone, bile rising in my throat. The next day, she cornered me in the kitchen. "He was always supposed to be mine," she whispered, her smile cruel. "You know that, don't you?" "You were just filling in. A substitute until I decided to come back. I wanted to slap her, to scream, to shatter the smugness from her face. But I stood frozen, every nerve screaming with humiliation. She wasn't finished. Every few days, another video arrived. Different angles, different nights, but always the same message. Sophia had him, and I did not. Worse still, Adrian never mentioned it. He didn't apologize, didn't try to hide it. He carried on as though our marriage had never existed, as though I were nothing more than furniture in his house. But if Sophia thought she had broken me, she was wrong. Each video, each smirk, each whispered reminder of my insignificance planted something inside me. Not despair, but fire. I had been lost before, forgotten, discarded, replaced. But this time, I wasn't going to disappear quietly. This time, I would not be the ghost in someone else's story. This time, I would fight. And when I was done, neither Sophia, nor Adrian, nor the parents who forced me into this life would ever look at me as the replacement again. They would look at me with fear. The last video broke something in me. It wasn't Sophia's smug smile or Adrian's careless passion. It wasn't even the whispered words at the end. He was never yours. It was the realization that I had allowed myself to become their victim again. My parents' discarded child, Adrian's unwanted wife, Sophia's plaything. I had let them strip me of dignity, piece by piece, until nothing remained but silence. But I was no child anymore. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat at my vanity, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My face was thinner than I remembered, my eyes hollow from too many sleepless nights. Yet beneath the fragility, something glimmered. Steel, waiting to be forged. I whispered aloud, "No more." The next morning, I began my work in silence. Adrian's wealth was old, but much of it was tied to public perception. His company thrived on appearances, on a flawless image of power and stability. I'd spent a year studying that company from the sidelines, noting its cracks, its weak points. Sophia thought I was weak, too fragile to strike back. She had no idea that every cruel gesture, every taunting video had been fuel. I began by cultivating connections. At charity galas, I stopped playing the quiet wife. Instead, I spoke to people Adrian ignored, his rivals, his board members' wives, the journalists who looked for whispers in the shadows. I smiled, I listened, and I let them underestimate me. Meanwhile, I opened accounts in my own name. The allowance Adrian tossed at me like scraps. I invested carefully, tripling it in months. He never noticed. He never cared enough to look. And Sophia, she grew bolder with each day. She slipped into Adrian's office in the evenings, flaunted her presence at the house as though daring me to protest. Once, she even left her earrings on the nightstand beside his bed, their sparkle meant for me to find. When I confronted her, her laughter echoed through the marble halls. "You'll never win, Clara. He'll never love you. They'll never choose you. I smiled then, for the first time in her presence. A real smile. Maybe not, I said softly. But they'll regret underestimating me. Her smirk faltered, if only for a second. That was enough. In the weeks that followed, I built the foundations of my own life. Separate, secret, strong. I contacted lawyers, accountants, people who could help me untangle myself from Adrian without leaving me empty-handed. I gathered evidence of Sophia's affair, careful records of her messages, her videos, her smug confessions. The day would come when I would expose them both. Not in anger, not in desperation, but in cold, calculated revenge. For the first time since I was 5 years old, I didn't feel lost. I felt found. Because I finally understood something no one in my family had ever taught me. Belonging is not given. It is claimed. And I would claim mine, not as the forgotten child, not as the stand-in bride, not as the victim of Sophia's cruelty, but as the woman who rose from the ashes of their betrayal, sharper, stronger, and more dangerous than they could ever imagine. The next time Sophia sent me a video, I didn't flinch. I didn't throw the phone across the room or bury my face in my hands. I simply saved it. And I smiled. Because one day soon, it wouldn't be my humiliation on display. It would be theirs. The storm broke on a spring morning. I had waited for months, gathering everything I needed. Every video Sophia had sent me, every careless confession she had laughed into my face, every financial document Adrian had neglected while chasing her shadow. I didn't want a messy outburst. I wanted precision. The first domino fell at a shareholders' meeting. I walked into the room dressed in the color of power, black silk, understated but commanding. Adrian didn't even know I was on the guest list until I took my seat in the front row. And then I stood.
Before this meeting begins, I said, my voice steady. There's something you should all see, one by one. The videos played on the screen behind me. Sophia and Adrian entwined, whispering, laughing. Her words sharp, undeniable. This marriage was never real. He was always mine. Gasps filled the room. Phones lit up with recording cameras. Adrian's face drained of color as the board members shifted uncomfortably, their empire's image cracking with each passing second. By the time the last video ended, the damage was irreversible. I handed the lawyers the document's proof of Adrian's financial negligence, his betrayal of contracts, the millions quietly funneled into Sophia's indulgences, the kind of evidence that toppled reputations. When it was over, I didn't look at Adrian. I didn't need to. His empire was crumbling, and for once, he knew I had been the one to light the match. Sophia tried to find me afterward, her perfect mask slipping into desperation. You think you've won? She spat, her hands trembling. You're nothing without us. You'll always be nothing. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time I saw not a rival, not a tormentor, but a frightened girl who had lived her whole life needing to be chosen. I was nothing because I let you define me, I said quietly, but not anymore. And I walked away. I left the mansion that night without a backward glance. No luggage, no souvenirs, no chains tying me to the house of glass and marble. My parents didn't call. Adrian didn't chase. Sophia didn't dare. For the first time since I was 5 years old, I belonged only to myself. The city stretched before me, wide and endless, alive with possibility. I didn't know where I was going, and for once I didn't care, because I wasn't lost anymore. I was free.